I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is there a motion?
Move to open this work session.
Is there a second? Ms. Henry?
Mr. Hikes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. Vile, Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Before we begin the normal business of this work session, I would like for us to take a few moments to acknowledge this difficult day on the calendar for all of us of St. Louis Public Schools. It was a year ago, on October 24th, that we all endured one of the worst tragedies in the history of SLPS. While the shooting took place at CVPA and CSMB, it has touched everyone in our district in some way. We are all still healing. I now like to introduce Mr. Perry Anselman, Assistant Principal at CVPA, as well as an accomplished musician who will play for us while our guests step forward. We want to acknowledge the memories of those we've lost. Alexandra Bell was a sophomore at Central and just shy of her 16th birthday. Her mother, Miss Keisha Akers, is with us this evening. Ms. Akers, can you please come before us? Also, a wonderful teacher, Ms. Jean Kusker, was lost a year ago. We have several members of her family who have been kind enough to join us. Can you please stand? We also had people who were injured. They continue today, a year later, healing from wounds, both physical and psychological. Our prayers and our support will remain with you every day. Brian Collins, Tristan Harris, Tony Jefferson, Aladdin Magnum, Yamilto Rodriguez, Jordan Adams, Anthony McGee. I also want to mention the team who was first on the scene. It has not been addressed often enough that St. Louis Public Schools staff and security were the first to put themselves in danger to save lives. They definitely saved lives. May I introduce Officer Jermaine Yancey, Principal Fred Steele, Captain Misty Doby. Once again, Mr. Perry Anselman. Also, I would like to acknowledge CSMB, CVPA safety officers, Darnice Larson, Robert Finley, Marlo Brown, Chastity Combs Fuqua, and Greg Stedman. Finally, to all the St. Louis City first responders, to our neighbors up the street at Snooks, to everyone at Gateway STEM who helped with reunification, and Colonel DeAndre Davis, Chief Square Watson, who led our security team through this all, I want to say thank you. This is just the beginning of an army of people from countless business and organizations who stepped in to help us in a time of need. I could keep us here all night trying to name them all. So let me just say one more thank you to all who have been so caring, generous, and helpful. We wanted to present you all with a small something you could all take home with you, but also something that will live on. There are many meanings and symbols associated with an azalea. One of them, it is said, is a reminder to take care of yourself, of oneself and family. Before you leave tonight, we invite each of the families to choose the beautiful blooming azalea bush that speaks to you. We hope you will always remember to take good care of yourselves. Hold on, Dr. As the board, we've worked to give the families your distance. We wanted to honor you, ensure that you've done your healing in your way. We wanted to make sure you were respected in your way. This was the hardest thing that we never expect anyone to have to experience. One thing that continues to stick with me is please listen to your children. And after you listen to them, do something about it. Dr. Scarlett.
Superintendent Keisha Scarlett. So while I was not here a year ago, I was with you. My first exposure to St. Louis Public Schools was on October 24th, 2022, when I watched all of you face an unimaginable crisis with equal parts bravery and grace. It was part of what drew me to this job as superintendent. I want to commend our Board of Education that was in place last year, then President Matt Davis, then Vice President Tony Cousins, Ms. Donna Jones, Ms. Natalie Val. These board members, along with Dr. Kelvin Adams, led the district through this tumultuous time, and I want to thank them for their steadfast leadership. I also want to thank Interim Superintendent Nicole Williams, Dr. Nicole Williams, for her work from January to June. What I can offer going forward is action. The district has already made improvements to the building itself and will make students and staff safer. A presentation here shortly will demonstrate how safety improvements are part of our district-wide priorities. We've also put a greater focus on our commitment to see that every student in SLPS has access to and support from mental health professionals whenever they need it. Schools have always been looked to as a safe haven. They should be a welcoming space. This has not changed. This is my pledge to you as a superintendent. This is our pledge to you as a school system, that this remains our priority. This is how it should be. We're committed to being the safe spaces for students, families, staff, our communities, and for anyone in our city who walks through our doors. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being part of our SLPS family.
Unfortunately, that is a hard part of the job, but we still have to go on and do business. We are going to move into the Pledge of Allegiance. So can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Before we move forward with the presentations, sorry, my earring. I want to recognize some people that always work extremely hard behind the scenes. They never complain when we ask. They step up to the plate. They never say no. They're just literally there. Dr. Borsche, can you please stand? Dr. Borsche came new on the scene. It was a struggle really trying to understand how to properly honor the two schools when it came to this anniversary. She was new and she really didn't know the population of the people, what was happening, but she was really trying to understand and do it right. And the principals was trying to plan it, and they wanted to do right, and they were being principals. They really wanted to try to honor the families, the students, the teachers. They just wanted to get it right, and she was planning it all, and they didn't realize that's not what they wanted. And she literally took a step back to listen to what the families and the teachers wanted. And by doing that, she listened, and we leaned in and listened. And because of her listening and us listening to the needs of the students, the teachers, the principals, you successfully gave them what they needed today. And I wanted you to be recognized because it was a lot of work. And I thank you, and I hope everyone understand the work that you put in. The students, the teachers, the principals actually had an opportunity. I want to publicly thank Botanical Garden for opening their doors, and the zoo for opening their doors for these 2 days. It wasn't just a free-for-all, but the kids actually had an opportunity to be kids. I want to also thank 801 staff. I understand you all had training to be able to support what was being done today and yesterday, and that meant a lot. We had the opportunity to see the kids and the teachers really enjoying themselves and not be worried, about the trauma that they were faced with last year. So I want you to be acknowledged for the work that you did. I want to also acknowledge Ms. Gloria and Dr. Claire Crapo. Tonight was challenging because we didn't know how and what it would look like, what needed to be done, and you guys really stepped up. And George, you did an excellent job in trying to figure out what and how we can properly honor these families. So I just want to make sure you guys know we see you, and I wanted you guys to be recognized. Dr. Crapo, can you please stand? George, and I don't know if Gloria is still here. She probably somewhere doing some with the families as always, but I do want to make sure you guys are recognized, and thank you for your hard work. Dr. Scarlett.
All right, so we'll get started with our presentations. And so the first up, we'll have Dr. Crapo. Everything on this is as it should be, correct? Operations first, thank you. So we'll have our operations, Chief Square Watson, our Chief Operations Officer, will come.
So good evening to the board, Dr. Scarlett, the listening public. First want to begin with thanking the board for that memorial, the remembrance for the families, the staff, the scholars at Central. My condolences to the families and all of those that were, the lives that were lost during that time. So today's presentation is the operation update with the focus and emphasis on ESSER and Proposition S projects and our plans to prepare and enhance our facilities to support the success for our 21st century learner. I want to begin this presentation with a visual of some of the challenges of the deferred maintenance that the district has faced over the years. You will see that we have infrastructure or envelope challenges, such as windows, some structural challenges, such as the sinkhole in the picture you see listed. Also, we have building challenges. When it rains, we get the flood. Restrooms in disrepair, some drinking fountains that are inoperable. In addition, we have emergencies that we face daily, such as the heat wave at the start of the school year, in which we had to relocate students from Bush to Nottingham. And as we approach the winter months, our team are prepared to make repairs to busted pipes and juggle between making sure that the buildings stay warm. So from all the deferred maintenance of the capital projects to the imbalance of the conditions and the underutilization of our school is where our story begins, but not where it ends. The display on the screen shows a tier system of where our schools are categorized for deferred maintenance. Those in red in the top right corner, they represent over $3 million of capital repairs, which mostly consist of our high schools, our larger facilities. Those in yellow, somewhat in the middle, represent roughly around $1 million to $2 million in deferred maintenance costs. And those are some of our larger elementary buildings and some of our middle schools. Those in green in the far left corner mainly represents a lot of our elementary schools, some of our newer facilities. But yet through this wide spectrum, you see some of the capital needs and repairs that need to be addressed in our schools. The caveat is we have identified internally over $350 million worth of improvements. However, thanks to the residents of the city of St. Louis, the Prop S bond was passed of $160 million. So the question is asked, so where do we start? We start by assessing our facilities, our buildings. The district has collaborated with Cordigan Clark to develop a facility master plan, which will provide information regarding the general condition of all of our facilities and establish costs, as well as upgrades and future maintenance. The plan will take approximately 16 to 20 months to complete, and it is currently underway. The facility master plan will be in alignment with the vision, the mission, and core beliefs of the district, in addition to the citywide plan for education that provides the framework or blueprint to reimagine what the educational ecosystem in the city of St. Louis should look like. Some factors that will go into the facility master plan include a facility condition index, more or less a objective performance tool that will help in some of our decision making. This facility condition index is a formula base. It's the total building repair cost divided by the total replacement cost. Factors in infrastructure, envelope, and energy. It also includes demographic analysis. The demographic analysis is the process in which we will analyze trends within the city. The key indicator is where we may see changes in student enrollment throughout the city to determine future needs for renovations or possibly even new facilities or construction. Educational adequacy, that includes accessibility, inclusivity, safety and security, energy efficiency and sustainability, and equity between our facilities. And last but not least, community engagement. That's engaging our local businesses, developers, political and civic leaders, as well as the community. Conducting town hall forums so that we can listen first, be informed of what is needed within the communities, and be able to educate our communities and stakeholders on how we can collectively work together on rebuilding our schools, communities, neighborhoods, and the city for our future generations. So as this plan is being developed, this next slide shows the matrix which prioritizes our capital projects. The highlighted section represents what we have been able to address using ESSER funds. The strategy has been to utilize ESSER funds, ESSER dollars first, to avoid what the industry is calling the funding cliff. This refers to the end of federal COVID dollars, COVID relief funds, that district and schools have been utilizing during the pandemic. The ESSER 2 deadlines ended on September 30th, 2023. ESSER 3 deadlines end September of 2024. So to avoid this funding cliff, ESSER funds were utilized to address indoor air quality. So we have provided duct cleaning to over 20 of our elementary schools in particular. In our prior bond issue, we did duct cleaning at the high schools. We've also replaced rooftop units, boilers, chillers, heat pumps at least 20 schools. This equipment has direct impact on air quality as it controls humidity levels and the comfort for our facilities. The equipment replaced was antiquated, unreliable, unrepairable, inefficient, and beyond life expectancy. Some of the things that you don't see: upgrades to our controls. We had updates to our controls at 55 sites. This allows our heating and cooling team to be able to monitor, control, and manage air quality throughout the district. ESSER funds were also provided or used to provide air purifiers in mainly the nurses' offices. We've done filter upgrades. In some cases, we upgraded our filters to MERV 13, and we've done extensive repairs that were made to existing equipment such as air handler units, VAVs, throughout the district that has impacted at least 25 schools. These repairs include replacing controls, valves, belts, motors, and coils. We've also been addressing our safety. Safety not only includes the image that you see with open gate detectors, surveillance camera, video fire security, radios, and scanners, but also personal protective equipment, custodial supplies, and equipment. We've been able to address some of our infrastructure needs. Projects such as window replacement, exterior door replacement, roof replacement, and asphalt and flat work. We've been able to contract with professional services such as environmental to deal with our hazmat, architectural and engineer services, that's through Cordigan Clark and Grice Trivers joint venture. Cordigan Clark, under the bond issue, their tasks are to develop this master facility plan, renovations to CVPA, CSMB, upgrades to the locker rooms at Gateway STEM, and potentially a new stadium at Vashon, next to Vashon. Grice Trivers joint venture, their task orders have been to provide upgrades to the auditorium, restrooms, signage, and ADA compliance issues. So this is just a glimpse. This is just a glimpse of what we were able to accomplish using ESSER funds to address many of the needs that were shown at the beginning of the presentation. Now we're in a place to keep the momentum going using Prop S funds to plan for our future projects that are outlined in the following slides. We begin with safety upgrades. Some of those safety upgrades include signage, fire alarm upgrades, and the list goes on. This is in collaboration with our construction management firm, Navigate. We also want to continue to improve our cafeterias and our auditoriums. This is in collaboration with the architectural firm, Grice Trivers, and the photos speak volumes. So what was provided to the board was actually some letters to say thank you. So this morning when I went over to Nottingham CAJT, I was welcomed not only with just the scholars in the school just saying thank you for their furniture, but they also provided some cards. And I think you all have just an idea and a copy of just them saying thank you for the furniture, the cafeteria furniture they received. We've done other upgrades to our cafeteria at Clyde C. Miller and Vashon. Research suggests that there's a direct correlation between capital improvements and student success. So by continuing to improve the environment, will result in improved attendance, behavior, and success in the classrooms. So here are more projects as we transition into Prop S, and the pictures that demonstrate progression, movement, and momentum. We also look forward to improving our grounds for outdoor play and activities. This includes our playgrounds. In addition, we're collaborating with Forest Park Forever for some of our outdoor classroom projects. And with Cordigan Clark, we're designing upgrades to our locker room and athletic fields at CVPA, Central, CSMB, Gateway, and hopefully with any reserve funds, we'll be able to build a new stadium adjacent to Vashon. And lastly, we want to be conscious, energy conscious. We'll be providing recommendations to the board to contract with an energy service company that will enable energy system upgrades using guaranteed savings as part of their funding. This will also aid the district to be in compliance with the St. Louis City Ordinance by 2025. So the next slide, more or less, is the question that's been posed. So what is next, and why are things taking so long? So most of the delays with Prop S were due to contract negotiations and legal review, which resulted in a lot of our professional service contracts and contracts in general being executed within the last month or last few months. Now that we have all of the firms contractually on board, we'll continue to implement what we call our quick hitter projects, which consist of some of those that are listed. And in the interim, we'll be finalizing the designs and scope of work for the projects that were mentioned earlier as part of the presentation. We anticipate some of the designs being finalized by February of 2024, and from there establish a procurement strategy and phased approach for each project. So lessons learned through an evaluation of some of our previous projects is by breaking down some of these bigger projects into smaller projects. This will allow for smaller startup companies and even establish new companies to be able to participate and bid on some of our projects. Once the designs are complete, we will be able to release these projects for bid, evaluate, and award projects with board approval by May. In collaboration with our construction management firm, architectural engineering firms, as well as our internal staff, we'll be able to monitor each project through closeout and again, evaluate the performance of our contractors and vendors. So as I conclude this presentation, we'll be more diligent on our communications. We'll be transparent and create an accountability system for funding expenditures via a website, dashboard, signage, social media, podcasts, etc. The listening audience can get updates regarding our Prop S through our Prop S Oversight Committee with the next meeting scheduled on December the 14th and quarterly meetings held afterwards. Provide updates with our community engagement forum or town hall meetings that were discussed earlier. And as we continue to build our system of excellence, we'll continue to pursue grant opportunities such as the $1.1 million for the Get the Lead Out of Our School Drinking Water grant, a $300,000 grant for safety and security upgrades. In addition, working with partners. As seen in the following slides, some of our partners have aid, such as the new bus lane at Central Visual Performing Arts, CSMB, the athletic field at Soldan, and last but not least, the Verizon Innovative Learning Lab program that provides state-of-the-art lab experience for our future leaders. So this concludes my presentation, and I open it up for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Watson? Vice President Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Watson. Prior to ESSER funds and Prop S funds, what is the capital improvement budgets, or what was the capital improvement budget for the district?
So prior to any of this additional funding, the facilities department were allocated roughly around $2 million for capital projects. And to put it in perspective, we replaced the roof over at Roosevelt, not the whole roof, but partial roof, and that was approximately $1 million. So that took half of our budget with just one school.
And was there any sort of stabilization budget for our vacant school buildings?
At this point in time, no.
$0.
No dollars.
The long-term planning, what's the thought process behind the time frame, the 16 to 20 months? Why does it take so long?
So it's a very thorough assessment of our facilities. So in essence, with the architectural firm, Corrigan Clark, in this master facility plan, they go by each school. They check the restroom. They see what programs are in the schools. They see the capacity. They look at all of the systems, infrastructure, energy, and the list goes on. So each school may take anywhere between a few days up to a week, depending on the size, to do this type of thorough analysis. When they conducted this similar assessment over at CSMB CVPA, that planning took approximately, I would almost want to say 2 to 3 weeks, almost to a month. And it's just because of the thoroughness of them looking at all of our systems, all of our infrastructure, utilization and programs within the schools.
And I think I recall in the Prop S meeting, they mentioned one of the prior studies that the district did like 10, 12 years ago, and the name of the firm escapes me. But they mentioned that they were going to look at that work and update it. Is that still is that a fair assessment of what they're going to be doing?
Yeah, so the district conducted what we call the MGT study back in, with the final comprehensive report in 2011. So approximately 12 years ago. With that, more or less the idea of blueprint, they are looking at it, and but the recommendation will be slightly different. But in essence, it will be a very real comprehensive approach to not only naming the systems in our schools, but I think with the extension of the demographic analysis, as well as just kind of looking at where populations will grow, will be the added component in this particular master facilities plan for this bond issue.
And the other thing that the district didn't have back in that previous study was the citywide plan, which is this sort of set of ideals for, okay, well, let's just not make demographic choices or, predict the demographics of the city, to make convenient schools, which, makes sense. We've never done that, but makes sense. I mean, we've planned it. We've never executed it. But then also to include, okay, well, how does this facility play into a modern learning environment? Is the planning team that you have, are they capable of doing that? Are they knowledgeable enough to do that? Or is there going to have to be other input, from the academic department or the district or whatever, or the community even, to include in that plan? Does my question make sense?
Yes, and it's all of the above. So this comprehensive master plan will not only encompass just the blueprint, the foundation to build this ecosystem within the city of St. Louis, but it will involve some of our stakeholders, as well as some of our school leaders, academic department, just some of the goals that we're planning on headed within the district. I think one of the key components that I really like in terms of working with Corrigan Clark are our partners. So we are partnering with communications, Vector Communications. There are other stakeholders, Dr. Dillon and some others that are assisting with this particular facilities master plan. But it is all inclusive rather of not only just those internally within the district, but it's also going to include those stakeholders and their community voice, which I think is a real key component. So those town hall meetings that'll take place will allow us to listen to what services or needs within the communities to help develop this ecosystem of learning and how we prepare our schools for this 21st century.
And the anticipation would be, those would be recommendations leading up to recommendations for the Board of Education to make 2025?
So that's when the 2025 is when the complete plan should be done with the facility master plan. However, they're going to pilot a few schools, and then at that point in time, we'll come back to the board just so that we'll be able to, you all will be able to see what this plan will address and how, what some of the information included in this particular master planning. So, and then with our approval, with the district and the board approval, they'll move forward to continue with the facility master plan.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. So as you're assessing quick hitter projects, as you're assessing urgent needs like flooding or lack of air conditioning or whatever happened at Carver, a cave-in, emergencies, but also then sort of within mind, you've got your tier 5, your tier 4 schools, and maybe projecting that their lifespan is over, or how do we prevent from throwing good money after bad during this process.
And that's a part of the planning piece. It's looking at the needs in a very strategic way, addressing those immediate needs. Anything safety, life safety, we'll address. Instead of maybe in the past where I believe we air conditioned a few facilities and then made some other recommendations, we'll be more strategic with this approach, with this master plan. So the work won't be in vain. In essence, it would allow this collective voice for us to not only see what the recommendations that'll be made, but this plan being inclusive of all stakeholders, and again, being a part of the infrastructure committee of the citywide plan, there were a lot of other stakeholders at the table. So this parochial schools, charter schools, all of us collectively working together to figure out how we're going to educate our students, our scholars in this 21st century. So this plan won't be in isolation. It'll be very intentional in the respects that there won't be necessarily monies that we're just throwing down the drain to do these improvements, and then we make other recommendations on down the line.
I was glad that you mentioned a commitment to do better about communicating, because I think that that's really important. I can give you some examples in terms of the fencing. I feel like that's a concern with a lot of our parents and teachers, and they don't know when the fences are coming, if they're ever coming, and I think we lost a little credibility on that. But also, so that important practical stuff, but also, to tell the story of the good investments that we've made, particularly with the ESSER money. I mean, those photos tell a lot, and I've been to a lot of schools where you really do see the impact, and, you see the impact that the students have and the excitement they have and the pride that they have in their building, and a lot of that is a result of just new furniture, new paint, new equipment and science labs and things like that. And I really hope that we can tell that story better to the taxpayers, to know that we are investing their money wisely, but also to promote the district and not this reputation of we've had $2 million capital budgets for the last 20 years and $400 million worth of need, that we are starting to address it, and that the conditions have improved dramatically. I mean, I like to say that our schools are safer and cleaner and healthier than they probably ever been. And we need to keep on that, but we also need to keep that consistent. So that was an editorial. My last editorial question was, I'm glad you mentioned the part about partnerships and looking for community partners to invest in some of these projects. And so I'd like to give a plug that there are 13 days remaining in the city's survey on how to spend the Rams Settlement Fund. And when I see your illustrations of football fields, that just seems to make total sense. So I would urge anyone who has the time to Google St. Louis City Rams Settlement Survey in the next 13 days and make a plug for investing in some SLPS facilities, which will be open and a source of community pride.
Thank you.
Ms. Secretary Jones.
Ooh, how could I come behind you, Matt?
That's what
That
I was
was
saying.
real nice, and it is definitely
That's what I
not a
was saying.
shameless plug because you are right on the money.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you so much. Once I looked at those cards, I got so excited because clearly, I remember when I first joined the board, I kept talking about our schools looking like a Taj Mahal. And it does make a difference what we're presenting to our children. You expect them to come and sit in a building for what, 5, 6, 7 hours, and you want it to look fantastic. And this is well on the way, and I'm so happy. I'm so proud of what you all are doing. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sorry. In line with the fence project, my daughter came home yesterday and said they pulled all the stuff up off the playground and now it's not bouncy, which, y'all have a plan, but it would have been nice to hear, from the school that, hey, this is happening and hopefully it will be fixed by then. And, maybe it's because it's the fall and don't expect kids to be playing outside as much. I don't know, but she was like, there's just concrete and we're still playing on the playground. So going back to that piece of Matt's, that we do need more communication, maybe to the schools and then to the families, which I get as a joint project. One of my questions is, we're doing a lot for the CSMB CVPA building. What are we doing for Gateway STEM, which is the school with our largest amount of students?
So for Gateway STEM, there'll be upgrades to basically the locker room and gym. Currently, we just renovated the cafeteria. We put air conditioning in the cafeteria as well, because that building has no central air.
What?
They have window units.
Oh my gosh.
So we're just phasing in a lot of those upgrades and improvements at Gateway STEM as we speak. But the cafeteria is practically completed outside of the new furniture. But they do now have air conditioning in the cafeterias, and then we'll be working our way towards the gym, that locker room, pretty much that whole wing behind that sits on the back of the building. That'll be renovated and updated so that it's compliant, ADA compliant. New gym floors, new lights, locker rooms, really kind of spruce up Gateway STEM, as that is, as you just indicated, the largest facility, school, and the largest enrolled building within the district.
Okay. Let's see, I always have questions about demographic analysis. Who's doing that?
So we haven't named the company or group or partner that we're going to conduct the demographic
Okay.
analysis at this time. I think right now we're just doing the assessment of our facilities, but as we get closer to that, we'll name who those partners are.
Okay. Just a plug for sociology professors around the city. And did you mention Dr. Dillon? What role does he play?
So he's been working with Cordigan Clark as a more as a sub consultant, and just collecting some of the information in terms of the assessments, and haven't been fully onboarded at this point in time, but just some of the preliminary discussions that we've had with Dr. Dillon just more or less includes our approach to this work, how we're going to approach this master facility plan. But we have yet to, outside of the assessment, we have yet to begin with the other phases or the other steps in that process for the facility master plan.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Board Member Hikes.
I would just like to say, as I go to the different schools, I really appreciate this presentation, because as you said earlier, I think it directly affects how a child learns. If they are happy in their environment, if they like their environment, I believe they do better. So I really appreciate this presentation. And as soon as you can move forward on it, you got my vote.
Well, and even with how we're approaching some of our projects, and I failed to mention this during the presentation, strategically, until we break things up, but we've been working north to south. So we're starting on our north side schools, Nance being the farthest north, Wallbridge, Herzog. So a lot of the photos within the pictures are our north side sites. So that is some of the plan, but as we kind of grow, and again, just learning from some of our past experiences to break some of these projects up, we'll have multiple contractors involved so that we can be more expeditious with some of our projects. So at that point in time, people will be able to see a lot of the work that's going on and not just solely rely on just one contractor or one vendor.
I have one more question. I remembered it. Do we have really good numbers on air quality, both with COVID coming back around, not being all the way gone? Are we doing everything we can to give our students and our teachers and staff the best air to breathe? I know the consent agenda looks like we're doing a lot of things for that next month. But having air filters in the nurse's office is great, but are the whole buildings getting their air filtered? You said something about MERV 13, and I don't remember what that is, but I know it's a thing. Could you just talk a little bit more about that?
So when it comes to air quality, with the initial ESSER funds, that was the direct impact, and that was our direct approach to addressing air quality. So some of those projects include the duct cleaning, to really clean out a lot of debris that were in a lot of our facilities. So some of the pictures were probably the better pictures, but I mean, you will see basketballs, and you can name it within some of our ducts and our vents within the schools. So that's ultimately is assessing and addressing a lot of the air quality. I think with a lot of the HVAC upgrades that we've done, particularly with bringing more fresh air into our facilities, has been an added plus. That has been a deferred maintenance item that has been neglected, to be quite transparent and honest. But now we're addressing and making sure that we bring fresher air into our facilities. I think the last piece to the air quality question is, how do we know? So we go in and we test. So we did our preliminary test to determine the quality levels, and that's more or less looking at some of the carbon dioxide, some of the humidity levels within our facilities. And so we'll go back and retest those just to make sure that those humidity levels and those carbon dioxide levels are where they need to be for us to have adequate and quality air.
Board Member Sadie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watson, for this presentation. Quick question. You mentioned when the plan is completed, as we near 2025, that we would pilot a few schools. How will those schools be selected? Will that be Corrigan Clark? Will that be them working with us to determine which schools will be those pilot schools for us to see some of the work that they're doing?
So, and we haven't named those schools at this time yet, but I wanted to kind of get a mixture, maybe a larger school, a newer school, an older school. Ideally, I want to pilot at least maybe 3 to 5 facilities, 3 to 5 buildings, just with the different ranges of condition, age, square footage, et cetera, et cetera. There'll be some input. I'll definitely follow up with Dr. Scarlett on maybe some of how we should approach and which schools that we should select. But the idea is that we want to be able to at least get an idea for I'm using Gateway Complex, which has an elementary, middle school, and Gateway Michael. That's more or less 3 buildings in that we can more or less do some type of assessment to get an idea of what needs that what do we need for our elementary side, what do we need for our middle school side, and of course for those in the autism wing at Gateway Complex, it'll allow us to at least be able to see the different perspectives so that when we do roll this out, we have a better idea, baseline information, and more of a plan as we kind of approach some of our bigger and larger facilities. So at this point in time, we haven't necessarily named those schools, but as we kind of get more into the assessment phase, and this pilot won't happen, I mean, it'll happen before 2025. So we'll hopefully have the names of those schools in which we'll follow up with Dr. Scarlett and get ultimately her blessings over the schools that we're going to name so that we'll be able to conduct that pilot. You all have a report of the information once it's completed, so you'll see the comprehensive approach for this master facility plan, and then we'll be able to roll out the rest of the schools in that same manner.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure there was like equitable process in place for
Absolutely.
selecting those pilot schools. And then I just want to say I love the partnerships, and just curious if more partnerships are possible, like Forest Park Forever. I'm not sure how they, what schools they're looking at and doing these outdoor spaces, but how can we expand that and make sure that, that a lot of our schools have these opportunities from these great partnerships here in the city of St. Louis.
Forest Park Forever, we've been working with Leanne White. Can't think of her title, but Leanne White has, we actually piloted 2 schools, Hickey and Laclede, and where they actually, and I wish I would have had some of the pictures for that, where the Forest Park Forever were basically able to have these logs that sat around the school. So when students go outside for outdoor play, I mean, they made this really into a nice, almost a jungle gym type of approach. But they have a really good, and I know Ms. White will probably, as she talked to me a lot about, I believe it's at Forest Park where you'll be able to see like the turtle area where it's made of wood, and this is similar to what we want to bring into the district. Of course, we'll be taking those safety precautions to make sure that there's no issues or concerns with the type of wood or materials that we bring in. But just that partnership of working with Forest Park Forever, I definitely believe will take the district a long ways, and something simple, give them outdoor play activities so that we can really get more exercise and outdoor play.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Watson? Thank you so much, sir. Excellent work. Dr. Scarlett?
Thank you so much, Chief Watson. Next, we'll have Mr. Lou Kruger. He'll be coming. He's our Director of Student Placement. I think I made up a title for you. Sorry, Mr. Kruger. Okay, all right. And he will be presenting a part 2 of the magnet process that Chief Van Noy shared with us last time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Scarlett, Board President Cousins, Vice President Davis, all board members, for the opportunity to present on the SLPS magnet school selection process. So a brief history of magnet schools in the SLPS. They began in 1975 through a federal grant. In 1983, they expanded as the district was under a federal court supervision to implement the area-wide voluntary schools desegregation plan. In 1992, that plan expanded again with another court directive, and under that directive is when the lottery and lottery placement policies begin. The framework of those policies are currently what our process is based upon through today. In 1999, there was a desegregation settlement agreement. 2009 is when that agreement expired. And this coming next 24-25 school years, when the phase out of the area-wide voluntary desegregation program is complete for any new students. Students who are in the program now can remain as they matriculate through their grade levels and graduate, but no new students will be permitted to enroll. So we start with application submission. Applicants are limited to 2 choices. One exception to that is for gifted elementary applicants. They can submit up to 4 choices depending on the grade level that they are requesting. Submission is done either online or on a paper submission. You can see the numbers there. Coming out of the pandemic, we had a fairly significant drop in the number of applications submitted. Last year, that number rose again significantly. As of Sunday, through Sunday, we had 2,894. As of today, we're actually over 3,000. Links on the bottom there are to the district's information site about magnet schools and how to apply, as well as the application site itself. Every applicant who applies has to be certified for generally 2 things. Residency. We use the zip code to do that for the most part. There are some overlapping zip codes in the city and county that those need to be checked. The other is for the other exception, the exception I mentioned earlier is for students who are currently attending in the county, from the county districts into city schools, as well as SLPS employee students. The other check we use is for the school and the district the student is currently attending. This helps establish the placement priority in the lottery. There are 7 priorities that we use, and those will be visited on the next slide. After the lottery deadline, applicants are processed on the first-come, first-served basis with no priorities used. Lottery priorities are direct continuity. This is primarily for 5th to 6th grade, or for example, 5th to 6th grade students, such as Ames Visual and Performing Arts 5th grader to Carr Lane Visual and Performing Arts 5th grade. Those students are not required to submit an application. That placement goes along a feeder pattern, which we use, and parents can apply to go to other schools, but they do not need to apply to for their child to continue on in the program that they're in. Indirect continuity is primarily used, priority 2 is primarily used for 8th to 9th grade students. This gives current SLPS 8th grade students the best opportunity for placement to magnet in high schools. There we Sibling is the third priority use. That is verified using the student's address. The sibling must be currently enrolled and projected for next school year for the applicant to have sibling priority. The goal with sibling priority is not necessarily for students to have their whole family in a magnet school, but actually into the same magnet school where possible. Fifth priority is currently enrolled in SLPS schools. One exception we push for that is for entry-level grades, pre-K 3, 4, and kindergarten. If they're not enrolled in any school, when they submit the application, they are given the priority 5. Priority 6 is students who are not enrolled in an SLPS school. These are mostly your private and charter school students. It was the priority given to county transfer applicants, but as stated, those are no longer applicable. Priority 7 is students who are currently enrolled in an SLPS magnet school. This is the last group considered as students are already holding a magnet seat. Applicants are assigned one priority, and that is the priority the highest priority they qualify for. Qualifying for 2 priorities does not enhance chances as, say, all priority 1s are placed first, then 2s. We take a look at overcrowding while we're doing that, and then all 3s, et cetera, before moving on to the next priority group of applicants. And that link at the bottom is to the website that shows what the priorities are, with a bit more explanation. Many of our schools have criteria. All 7 high schools and 5 of our gifted programs for 12 of the 28 magnet programs having additional criteria. On the next slide, the SLPS magnet high schools with criteria, they set and implement that criteria. All SLPS high school applicants must be determined eligible by those schools requested prior to going through the lottery and prior to being given placement. Another bit of history, prior to 2002, only Metro was the high school which had criteria. Central was added in that same year, and then in 2008, McKinley High School came online with criteria. Then in 2011, all magnet high schools were allowed to establish and implement criteria. The gifted programs are, the gifted program applicants criteria set by the SLPS gifted office per Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education guidelines. Gifted criteria for eligibility is basically 90th percentile or above in general mental ability and 80th percentile or above in at least one area of academic achievement. So how do we determine open seats? An enrollment target is set for each grade level at each school. These used to be previously set by the court order, but we take a look at the capacity at the school, grades that are in place, and set that according to the Missouri desired standard pupil teacher ratios, or the midpoint of those ratios between the standard and desirable standard. You can see the graph at the bottom. We typically try to use the midpoint between those 2 numbers. In addition, based upon a 5-year capture rate, a number of open seats is determined using the current enrollment and matriculation cohort for each grade level. What we mean by that is we know some students are not going to show up or are going to decline their seats, so we do try to over-prescribe the school or the grade level on the basis of that capture rate to get students their acceptance notices as quickly as possible. In the middle of the year, for the next school year, staffing levels are currently taken into consideration when accepting students in the mid-year. We don't want to be adding students to where staffing shortage may exist. For placement offers, after the lottery, the parent dashboard is updated. Emails and texts go out informing parents of this. After the lottery, first come, first served process is very similar, but it's undertaken every 2 to 3 weeks. Procedures for placement offers and wait lists. Applicants may not remain on the wait list for a school requested if offered placement to another school requested, even if not the first choice. Parents are informed often on magnet school information websites that please do not choose a school you're not willing to send your child to attend. Parents are asked to decline seats in writing. We do this because years past we've had parents calling to tell us they declined a seat, and they weren't declining for their child. They were declining so that their child could be pulled off of the wait list by declining for another student. So we require that in writing, and email works for that just fine. The district has a default practice where any school that is requested and placement is offered. The student is assigned to that seat for the next school year unless we do receive a declined offer in writing. So after those placement offers are made, we have to update to the SIS database. All applicants offered are placed requiring identification number creation and a school assignment update. This process is completed manually for over 4,000 students in the current school year, actually 4,244. So any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Kruger. That was a lot of information, very informative. I also want to thank you because on behalf of all of the parents that know who you are through the years, everybody knows who Lou Kruger. I just met you a couple months ago. I felt like it was a celebrity. But I mean, you're known for solving problems, being very quick to respond to people, explaining things. And I know that that's not an easy task because there's a lot of anxiety around this process. And so I just want to thank you for all of your knowledge and your work.
Thank you for those kind words.
And that it's been appreciated by many. I want to ask about the applicant eligibility criteria. So just to clarify, when you say that it's set by the schools, that's the school principal sets the criteria?
For the most part, yes. When this is, the criteria was established for those schools in 2011. The network superintendent and superintendent at the time asked the schools to provide that. It was approved. And going forward, any changes that were made need to be approved. Not many changes have been made over the years. But yes, it typically is the school principal and whatever staff they implement to set that criteria.
And do you know, I can look it up, do we have a board policy that talks to magnet schools setting admission criteria?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Since 2011, you said there haven't been many changes, so I think I know the answer to this question. It's not like every year the schools get together, talk about their programs, look at their criteria, and more importantly, look at number of applicants that don't make the criteria but may be a better fit for other schools. There's none of that sort of meeting of the minds every year to make sure that this magnet process, people are going to the school that's right for them.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And that'd probably be a good idea, would you think? Do you have an estimate or do you have an actual number of students who don't meet the admission criteria and then don't go to another St. Louis public school?
Well, I mentioned that we placed 4,200 students last year. We had received over 10,000 requests. Now, those requests are not necessarily representing students. You can have more than two choices. We really are processing for about 7,000 children. So there's roughly, 3,800 that were left out there last year. Now, a number of those are not necessarily ineligible. They either declined the seat. Other issues may have occurred that they didn't attend. But many of them, they were not eligible. My guess is, and this is a guess, it's going to be probably about 1,000 students. Whether that's going to be not just for high schools, though, that's going to be for students who applied for a gifted program as well. Now, a number of those students, I say they're ineligible. Many for gifted requests, they're not tested, so I don't have a result. As well as for the high schools, the status is not given. So, if you're asking for how many are ineligible, I'd say roughly about 1,000. But the number of those that aren't given a status probably increases it to maybe 1,400 or 1,500.
And do we have any training, or do we have any mechanism, whether that's training for school-based staff that are making these eligibility criteria at high schools, or anybody here at central office? And I know the recruiting division does some of this, but their focus is mostly on neighborhood schools. So if you're going to be one of these students that applied for a school, got through to the lottery, because as we mentioned last time, the lottery is really only significant at this point for one grade and one school in terms of the number of applicants because they're down. So the space is less of a factor. It's more you may not get in because you don't meet that criteria. Is there any sort of admissions counseling, I don't know what the proper term, or handoff, or recruitment, or, you know, a dialogue with the parents, say, hey, you know, the grades aren't right here, or, you know, the attendance wasn't right, but, you know, this other program has different criteria. Maybe this is a good fit. Can we set up a tour or anything like that? Is there anything like that that happens with those 1,000 students?
I wouldn't say it's happened recently, but in past years, and this is probably pre-pandemic, we would take those students who weren't eligible, identify what neighborhood school for high schools, Vashon, Roosevelt, Sumner, that the student would be assigned to, and encourage them that, you know, reach out to this school. And we would even give that information to those schools as well, so they could reach out to those students who may be assigned to that site. As far as any training goes, I mean, the training I provide is how to process the applicants.
Right.
So that's what I can offer.
Thank you.
So can I follow up with that question that he's asking you? So in regards to that, does the recruitment office, do you all kind of work hand in hand with that? Like whoever is not accepted in the lottery that you have, do you kind of refer? I think the question you're asking is, are they referred over to the recruitment office?
Well, what we've done is, if a student, let's use say the example of 5th to 6th grade students. If those students who have not applied to go to a magnet school and they haven't received, you know, a notice that says, congratulations, your child's accepted and so forth, those 5th grade students, those names were given to the recruitment office, and they were going out there and either encouraging them to apply or giving them to the middle schools to welcome them to their new schools. So there is some of that process that is done. The other thing we do is we do keep up with the recruitment office to let them know this is where the openings are. Now, there's very few schools where there aren't open seats, so for the most part, it's still a wide open playing field.
Okay. Board Member Hubbard.
One of the things that I've seen is that with the magnet schools, and in particular the gifted schools, for parents who are pursuing that, there's a huge scarcity mindset because those schools, you know, generally speaking, it seems they have more resources because they have better resourced parents, but people see that. I mean, I philosophically am against that. Do y'all have any plans, or is that just the way it works, or do you have any plans to change, maybe have more seats, or, you know, I don't know how many students could fit in Metro, but is that something that is even on your radar? Because it is a way that inequity exists within the district that I find more than troubling. And the way that our gifted schools are not representative of our student population in the district in particular is morally wrong, in my opinion.
Okay. Well,
do we have plans for this?
For your information, Metro holds 330. Okay. I'll get to your gifted question in a minute. Years ago, there was rabid concern because there weren't enough seats like Metro in the district, and McKinley was brought on board. And not too long after that, CSMB was for schools, small schools, to have much more capacity for students who meet those level of requirements. Now, I'm not too far off from you when I have a problem with that kind of representation in a public schools district, but same thing with the gifted programs. I said to Dr. Scarlett in a meeting earlier, or maybe it was last week, that I'm not a real big fan of the way St. Louis Public handles gifted education. It is unique in the state, as far as I know, definitely in this region, in that we take all the gifted students and we pile them into specific buildings. As far as plans to change that, I mean, I don't have any plans to change that. I would take the directive from the board, superintendent, and people in the academic world to look as to how we can do that. And I'm not to say that we can't do that. We're no longer under any court supervision. The district can do those changes as it sees fit with your board approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kruger?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I've known you over the years, and you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank
But
you.
my question is about the way that students are recruited to these various schools. I like the idea that Matt had, that the schools need to come together and talk about the criteria to allow students inside of schools. But one thing I noticed back in the day when my children were in magnet school, one in particular, he was going to become a student at Collegiate. But we went to the picnic for Collegiate to kind of a warmer, kind of say, for kids to get to know each other. And he decided that he didn't want to go because he said, Mom, all these county kids, why they get to go here? And I just said, all the county kids, what you mean? I didn't understand that many of our students from SLPS were not qualified. I didn't meet the requirements to attend Collegiate, and it's such a great opportunity to become a nurse, a doctor, or what have you in that field. And I'm really looking forward to the what Matt suggested to have that all looked at, because are we still doing that, allowing students from the county to come into our magnet school program?
Well, no, not for the start of next school year is when that program has expired. No new residents of St. Louis, of the county participating districts, can apply for their children to come into St. Louis City magnet schools. The reverse side of that is no city residents can transfer to go out to those county schools. So the 40-year desegregation program is, it's not like totally over, because those students there will be able to matriculate through as they graduate, but there'll be no new children that are going to be able to apply and be assigned. So that is over.
Any other questions?
It's not a question. I just want to re-emphasize what's been said, that I think this criteria is problematic. And I will agree with President Davis that we do need to sit down and discuss, or the district needs to discuss this criteria for each of the schools, because it reeks of inequities. And so I just wanted to emphasize that point, that this criteria that we're setting, or that was set years ago, we should be in conversation about what's working and what's not, and what changes we need to make. So just wanted to emphasize that point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, and I hope everything is okay with your wife.
So far, so good. She
Thank you.
came from the doctor today and clean bill.
Good news, good news. Thank you. Dr. Scarlett?
Next, we'll have Dr. Marion Smith Jr. to come and present about our student goals, our portfolio of measures. Welcome, Dr. Smith Jr. I'll just say, as he starts, this is a follow-up to our work that we've been doing. On August 22nd, on the second day of school, our board voted on some student success goals across 4 different areas. I don't want to steal his thunder. And so this is the next step in that, where we agree that we get some runway over the next 2 months in order to develop a portfolio of measures to help us to begin measuring these student success areas. So thank you, Dr. Smith.
All right, I appreciate that, Dr. Scarlett. And so good evening, Board President Cousins, Vice President Davis, Board Directors, Superintendent Scarlett, and our SLPS community. And so once again, I'm Dr. Marion Smith Jr., Chief Academic Officer, and I have the privilege this evening to share with you an update on our proposed portfolio of measures to support your student outcome goal priority areas. First thing that I want to say is engaging in this work has been a collaborative and cross-department and division process. I would like to thank members of the Academic Excellence team, as well as the academic office leaders who led the day-to-day work in the identified student outcome goal areas, specifically Dr. Kimberly Moody, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and our elementary ELA and math curriculum specialist, Dr. Esther Paulsenberger and Dr. Teresa Wright-Frazier, Dr. Josh Henning, our Associate Superintendent of College and Career Readiness, Casey Donahue, our Director of CTE, Career Technical Education, and Cassetta Brown, Coordinator of School Culture and Climate. And so our agenda for today and our time together will be in 4 parts. Part 1 is a quick reminder of everyone that's listening and viewing of your approved student outcome goal areas. Next, I'll share proposed flagship goals, and then interim measures of each of the goals. And then last, I'll open it up for questions. And so one point of clarification about the development of these goals and measures is that the team reviewed multiple sources of data, specifically looking at historical trends in the district in each student outcome goal priority area, and current district baseline data to discuss and outline goals that would be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And so on our next slide here, as a board, you identified and approved 4 student outcome priority areas. And so these 4 areas are listed on the slide: 3rd grade reading growth and proficiency, 3rd grade math growth and proficiency, priority 3, college and career readiness, specifically high school students prepared for workforce and post-secondary employment, and 4th, culture and climate with our student well-being. And so here we have goal number 1 with our 3rd grade reading. And so by May of 2026, the percentage of 3rd grade students scoring proficient or higher, meaning proficient or advanced, will increase from our current baseline data of 21.8% to 39% as measured by our MAP, so our Missouri Assessment Program, our state assessment. And so with this goal, it's important to note that DESE has a recommended growth of 3 percentage points each year, and what we're proposing is that we double that each year to address our particular gaps in this particular area. The next slide that I share with you provides a reference to show the percentage of 3rd grade students scoring proficient or advanced on our ELA map over the past 3 years, specifically 3rd grade, since that is the grade level of focus for our board. So if we take a look, school year 2021, 14.5% of our scholars scored at proficient or advanced. School year 21-22, 16.9%, and school year 22-23, we're at 21.8%. And so while this data represents the overall MAP, English Language Arts achievement, the next slide that I'll show you will be a way for us to track progress and to narrow the ELA focus to your area of focus, which is reading, specifically calling out those grade 3 state standards in ELA that focus on those key reading strategies or key reading standards such as comprehension, vocabulary, making connections, text features, literacy techniques, text structures, print awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. So I just want to be clear that our MAP data represents English Language Arts, and we'll be looking at how can we call out specific reading areas as we continue to track this goal. So if we take a look at this particular slide, I've been told that you do have a copy of the slide deck, and so apologies for the small writing there. But as we identified ways to track progress toward the flagship goal and to address both your focus on growth and proficiency, this slide highlights just one high-level way in which we will monitor and report out on progress. And so we plan on using one of our district assessments, so our STAR reading, which is administered 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. And we've outlined specific interim goals for our cohort of students who will be 3rd grade students by 2026. And so this means we will start monitoring the progress of our current 1st grade students this year. And so as you see on the slide, by the end of this school year, the percentage of 1st grade students scoring at least the 50th percentile rank, our focus is to increase that from our current baseline of 40% to 50%. And so as a reminder, a student's percentile rank indicates that the student scored as well as or better than that percent of students in the norm group. And so students scoring at the 50th percentile rank are well within the average range. If we take a look at 24-25, we'll now take a look at our cohort of 1st grade students who are now in 2nd grade, and the focus will be to increase those scoring in at least the 50th percentile rank again, with that new baseline of 50% to be at 60%. And in our final year of 25-26, we'll look at our cohort of 2nd grade students who have now transitioned on to 3rd grade, and the focus will be to increase those scoring once again in at least that in at least that 50th percentile rank by our new baseline of 60% to 90%. And so just as a point of notification, the score of 67% is aligned to our state MAP cutoff percentage for proficiency. We have additional metrics that we're using, and we can talk about those, as well as additional indicators that we're following. But I bring our attention to flagship goal number 2 proposed here. We have goal 2 with our 3rd grade math, and so very similar to English language arts, by 2026, we have the percentage of our 3rd grade students who are scoring proficient or higher will increase from our current baseline. This time for math, the baseline is 17.1% to 40% as measured by our state assessment. What I wanted to point out here is that unlike ELA, math does not have a DESE recommended growth percentage each year. And so as a district, we looked at regional and national trend data and different research reports, and we identified having a minimum of a 7% growth annually so that we could expedite closing the achievement gap in this particular content area. The next slide shows you just baseline data that we were able to review specifically, once again, just with 3rd grade. And so this shows the percentage of our 3rd grade students scoring proficient or higher, so proficient or advanced on our MAP, our state assessment, over the last 3 years, 2021, 11.6, 21, 22, 14.6, and 22, 23, 17.1. So that 17.1 begins our baseline for this particular school year. Very similar to English language arts, we've identified specific interim goals to help us monitor our progress towards that flagship goal. So once again, we'll be using one of our district assessments, that's STAR Math. Once again, very similar to ELA, it's administered 3 times a year in the fall, winter, and spring. And very similar to English language arts, we'll be tracking initially our 1st grade students this year over the course of the next 2 years until they're in 3rd grade. And so starting at 23-24, our focus is on our 1st grade students scoring at least the 70th percentile rank will increase from our current baseline of 17% to 28%. And so you'll notice that our percentile rank looks a little different than ELA. ELA, we were at the 50th percentile, and here we're at the 70th percentile. And remember, we wanted to make sure that the difference from our ELA reading goal to our math is because we want a faster pace of acceleration in the area of math so that we can reach the levels of proficiency that we've outlined within our 3 years. And once again, as a reminder, a student's percentile rank indicates that the student scored as well as or better than the percent of students in the norm group. So if we have students scoring at or above the 70th percentile, at or above, that is well above the national average specifically for mathematics. Continuing to look at the chart, school year 24-25 will increase, now tracking our 2nd grade scholars from that original, with that new baseline of 28% to 39%, scoring in that 70th percentile rank. And then in school year 25-26, that final year, being able to use that new baseline of 39%, scoring at least in that 70th percentile rank to 50%, so that we can reach that MAP cutoff percentage for proficiency. Flagship goal number 3 takes us away specifically from reading and mathematics to the end of our time in our high school experience. And so the culminating opportunities is about graduation. And so if we take a look at flagship goal number 3, this goal has 3 areas that I would like to bring to your attention. The first is our 4-year graduation rate. And so we're saying by May of 2026, the 4-year graduation rate will increase from our current baseline of 69% in 2023 to 80%. The second is our focus on what we're calling rigorous career pathways. And so this is defined by the percentage of graduates that are enrolled in advanced credits, our International Baccalaureate program, our college and career readiness, our career and technical education programs, and our dual enrollment programming. And so we're looking at, by the end of May 2026, the percentage of our graduating seniors, so those class of 2023 through 2026, who are positively placed, and that's a definition by DESE, will increase from 90.4% to 93% as measured by the DESE 180-day graduate follow-up report. And so providing a few pieces of context for you, DESE defines positively placed as what is designed or illustrated at the bottom of the slide there, focusing on enrollment in our colleges, universities, or trade and technical schools, employment, or enlistment in the military. So we think about positive placement according to DESE as it relates to our 3 E's. So enrollment, employment, and enlistment. And then our third focus within this flagship goal is on identified student groups currently below the 90th percent or below 90% positive placement rate. And so the chart that you have here provides you with a little bit of information around our school year 21-22 and our school year 22-23 data that we use to identify those overarching student groups below the 90% positive placement rate. And so if you take a look at the highlighted information, there were 3 scholar groups or student groups that were below our 90% threshold. One was our male students, the second was our African American Black students, and third was our Hispanic Latino students. And so one of the things that we're also going to focus on in this area is additional disaggregation of this information so that we can focus on those multiple identities, right? So Black males, Black females, Hispanic females, to ensure that we're addressing all of those different groups as well. And so as I said previously, apologies for the small type there, but you do have this information in front of you. But with our college and career readiness flagship goal, because there are 3 focus areas, we wanted to identify ways to track those particular 3 high-level areas as we report out on the progress. And so area number 1 is all about tracking the increase of the percentage of graduates that are engaged in what we call that rigorous career pathway. And our focus is going to be from our baseline of 43.3% to 50% by May of 2026. And so you can follow bullet number 1 between school year 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26 to see the growth in that particular area. Area 2 is tracking the increase of the percentage of our 8th through 12th grade students who have an individual career and academic plan from the end of our school year 23-24 baseline of 90% to 95% by May of 2026. So you can follow number 2 between each of those 23, 24, and 25 interim goals to track that progress. And then area 3 is tracking the increase of the percentage of our 9th grade scholars who complete the school year with at least 6 credits and a cumulative grade point average of 2.0 or higher from our original baseline this year of 71% to 82% at the end of the 25-26 school year. And so we know that there's long historical research and data about the predictive power of 9th grade GPA. And it's also documented in our University of Chicago Consortium of School Research that serves as an anchor for our thinking in this particular area. The 4th and final goal that you've identified and that we're making recommendations around is our final flagship goal of culture and climate, specifically focused on student well-being. So once again, by the end of May 2026, we're looking at the percentage of our 6th and 9th grade students who report feeling a sense of belonging, and we're defining that as a connectedness to school and adults. That's going to increase from our current baseline of 33% to 63% for our 6th grade students, and for our current baseline of 32% to 62% for our current 9th grade students, as measured by our Panorama survey. And so 2 points that I want to bring out there for clarification. Point number 1, the Panorama survey is a research-based perception survey. That survey collects data that captures student voice and allows students to express their perceptions about learning and teaching, about culture and climate, and classroom experiences. That survey is administered 2 times a year, 1 time in the fall and 1 time in the spring. And point of clarification number 2, we identified grades 6 and 9 because they are key transition years, right? If we think about students moving from a traditional elementary school to a middle school, 5th grade to 6th grade, and then the other group moving from either a middle school or a K-8 school to a traditional high school. So wanting to really be hyper-focused on those transition periods for those particular scholar groups. Very similar to all of the other goals, we've identified a few interim goals that we'll be tracking, not the only goals that we'll be looking at, but this is how we will continue to monitor our progress and report out on the yearly progress in this area. And so starting with our baseline data from the spring 2022 Panorama Survey, we'll look at specific questions in the survey that ask students' perceptions about learning and teaching, about culture and climate, and about classroom experiences. And then we will also track the percentage increase of our 6th and 9th grade students who do report that they feel that sense of belonging as measured by the survey, targeting a growth of 10% each year. And so with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Vice President Davis.
Just one quick question on the student well-being. Could you just talk a little bit more about how you landed on the survey responses regarding feeling a sense of belonging as opposed to maybe some other responses?
Sure, and so the Panorama Survey has a variety of questions. It's a perceptual survey, and so it's all about the perceived ideas or the perceived feelings that scholars have. We had an opportunity to look at the questions that are actually asked, and so one of the key indicators was a question that asked that directly. It was like, do you feel connected to your school? So I say that that's one that directly asks that particular question. And then we also have a few other additional interim measures that we're tracking that I could talk a little bit about. It's called our Tiered Fidelity Inventory that asks some of those other questions around connectedness to our schools. But that is the one that really speaks specifically to asking the question that you're asking, like, are we connected to an adult, or are we connected to school?
And you picked those transition years to focus on. Do you see an effect on academic performance tied to those transition years and a sense of belonging?
I would say the data that we had an opportunity to look at, and if I failed to mention this, apologies, when we think about, we have a few of our schools that are K-8, we have some that are K-6, we have the traditional middle school, and so looking at the data from those particular scholars to see when they do eventually transition to another space, like we do see either some gains in areas, but then we may also see some dips, because if you are in, I can make this generalization based on the data that we've been able to review, if you were in a traditional K-8 school, you don't necessarily have the changing of the classes and having to respond to 6 or more different teachers' expectations, right? And so that has a direct impact on how they may respond to certain things, right? And so I would say yes, and we're looking at carving out that particular data as well for some of those specialty schools that we have that are not clear-cut K-5 and 6-8.
So I feel like you've just landed on a theme for this evening. So going towards the strategic planning that we're doing under Prop S, going to the magnet school conversations and middle schools and high school choice in particular, and now you've just identified sort of the crazy nonsensical system that we have of some schools go to 8th grade, some goes to 6th grade, some you got magnet schools, you got 2 neighborhood middle schools, and the just variety of impacts that system has on so many things, but also it'll be interesting to see if you can put that together, those transitions and the way that students feel about those transitions. I mean, you know, my daughter is making her choice to go to middle school based on where the friend's going, and that's a sense of belonging right there. But our system doesn't promote that because, you know, the gifted kids went to McKinley, some kids left to go to middle school at 6th grade, her school goes to 6th grade. I'm just giving an example from my own, but you just identified some kids go to 8th. I know we had a conversation last year with one principal was with their families begging Dr. Williams, let's add a 6th grade to this school because the kids are all going to leave the district. And so, inadvertently, I think you've tied up this evening of presentations nicely, that we've got a lot of work to do structurally, and all of that affects not only enrollment, the health of the district, but also student achievement in the end. No, there's no question.
Do you agree?
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for that feedback.
I have questions. I'm sorry. I just got my kids to text me their MAP scores. And I have a third grade MAP score from last year. And it never talks about measuring literacy. It is measuring language arts, which you have to have literacy to do. So if our children can't read well, they're not going to get good scores on the ELA. You know, I've heard Dr. Scarlett say, and I think it's an accepted thing in the field of education, that the only way we can truly measure literacy and to actually know if our children are reading is to hear them read aloud. And none of these standardized tests are going to be able to do that. And so I don't know if I'm asking a question, but I'm really disappointed to see that our portfolio of measures doesn't include the only true, accurate way to do this. I'm not in charge of logistics. I realize it would be a lot to get every kid to read aloud. But what the ELA, the MAP test measures, is not literacy. And I'm really disappointed to see this as the marker that we're using. So I hope that there will be better markers. And also,
So may I respond to that, just to add a little bit more context?
Okay.
Sure. And so on slide number 5, if we put back up just to display the MAP information, one of the caveats that I called out was that we understand that the overall MAP English Language Arts achievement really focuses on that comprehensive understanding of English language arts. But a few of our other measures that have not been presented here really focus on calling out those grade 3 particular standards that really focus on reading, right? And so what I talked about, comprehension, vocabulary, making connections, text features, literary techniques, text structures, print awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. So being able to look at that as a part of our other measures. And so when we look at and I may have the name incorrect now, Ms. Van Noy. So it's like our IBDs. And so I know that we changed those. So our item bench descriptors. And so being able to look at, when we're doing a test item analysis, we're taking a look at the actual question. What is the question asking us to do? And then we're looking at that to say, well, this was a question that had nothing to do with like reading specifically. It didn't have anything to do with fluency. It didn't have anything to do with those key components. And so what are the ones that we really have to focus on to hit those particular areas that are called out in our grade 3 ELA reading standards? And so we have additional measures that I can share with the board around our common formative assessments, common summative assessments, also our evidence of impact data reviews, which is another measure that we'll be tracking just internally. We also have our the board approved 2 years ago a lot of money for our curricular resources with literacy, and so we use our curriculum-based resources for Tier 3 and SAVIS. And so the one that I spotlighted for all of you tonight was specifically around our overarching, and there are additionals that we'll be addressing as well that we could share with you.
I would definitely like to know about them. Thank you.
Dr. Smith Jr., I just wanted to clarify what I said about reading, about listening to children read aloud. It was specifically about decoding for fluency and for accuracy. So there are a number of different, as Dr. Smith Jr. shared, around mechanisms for teaching students to read. And so I was specifically speaking about one facet of reading, which was decoding, when I said the importance of listening to children read aloud. And what we're talking about are multiple measures, multiple different measures. And if we're able to measure at scale, this isn't just one classroom, we're talking about an entire school district. So we have to have mechanisms in order to actually measure data across the district. That requires technology, okay? Not in all cases. There are assessments that are classroom-based assessments that are really about what a teacher will do to refine instruction. And but if we're talking about reporting how students are progressing across certain aspects of their reading skill, then there has to be a combination of different types of measures. So we're calling the portfolio measures, hopefully triangulated minimally, but multiple measures that we have in order to help understand how a child is progressing with their reading. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Smith?
I'm sorry.
This is
I have
Natalie.
one more. Oh,
Oh,
Natalie.
sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Hey, board member Natalie.
Hey, so I guess my question is really just when we're setting these goals for ourselves as a district, as a team. We're gonna get the roast effect. What determines the goals that we set? Can you walk me through the process and what that looks like when you're deciding, we're going to move the needle 10 points on math or 5 points on reading within X amount of weeks or months? What does the process look like to make sure we're setting realistic goals and goals that are also not just realistic, but aggressive enough to do service to our students?
Sure, and so hopefully I'm able to answer all of that question. I'll try to work backwards. And so when I started at the very beginning, I said this was an extremely collaborative process with members of our academic excellence team, members of our academic office, members of cabinet, constantly providing feedback specifically to how do we make sure that we're first looking at historical data or historical trend data. And so if we take a look and, if Dr. Scarlett will allow for me to share additional information with the board. There is 10 years worth of data that we looked at initially in our group around ELA performance, around math performance, and we looked at what did that look like over time. And so I always like to say I want 100% of our scholars to be proficient and advanced, right? But we also have to focus on realistically what has actually happened over the last decade, what systems need to be in place, what structure. So those were all of the conversations. And I'll bring you back to one specific example of English language arts. DESE has a recommended 3% growth every year. And we looked at that and said, well, that's not enough for us. We have to double that minimally to be able to begin to close the gaps that we've seen over the last decade, right? And so that's why you see the proposed goal of 6% growth each year for English language arts. The second one was within mathematics. When we looked at the percentile rank, we said, wow, we're starting at 17%, even though over the last 2 years we've seen growth. I shared with you the data that we were at 11% and a 14% now. I think that was the ELA. We grew each of those years, but we said that's not enough for us. And so how do we now look at how are we closing the gap in our STAR assessments to be able to say at least 70% of our scholars are showing that they're performing at that 70th percentile each and every year to try to get us closer to that proficiency mark. So all of those conversations were had. One other conversation that we shifted from was, do we focus on in MAP our below basic and basic population, right? So do we focus on sharing with the board that our priority is going to be making sure that we're rising them up in the flagship goal? And we said, well, we're going to capture those particular scholars based on our growth goals that we have with STAR. If we're saying we're trying to make sure that at least a minimum of our scholars are at the 50th percentile or 70th percentile for ELA and math respectively, then that's going to address some of those below basic and basic scholars. We didn't want to present to you a flagship goal that focuses on our below basic and basic. We wanted to say that the floor for us is proficiency, right? We want to say that that's the floor and we want to build from that. And so hopefully that answers a part of that question. If not, then I can try to provide more clarification. Like I paused there because I'm thinking about all those elements, Ms. Val.
I appreciate that. I think you walking me through that kind of thought process really helps.
a lot of times we want to set goals for ourselves, and it's we want to get there really fast. But I appreciate the due diligence you're doing and making sure it's realistic, but also aggressive enough and optimistic enough. I guess I didn't have any other questions until Dr. Scarlett mentioned the thing about asking students to read aloud. Are we taking into account the social and emotional well-being of students when we're asking them to read aloud? What does that look like? What is the environment that they're reading aloud? Are they in their classmates' presence where there may be some issues with bullying or just social anxiety in general? Do they feel like they are, per that survey, feeling a sense of belonging when they're reading out loud? I mean, I know that, for instance, if I'm asked to read something in front of a crowd of people that may not be so willing to hear it, my reading definitely stumbles and stutters. So how are we really measuring that piece of it, and how much of that is weighted toward the comprehension? I guess it's a question more for Dr. Scarlett. So you're off the hook, Dr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate you asking for the clarification. So I want you to harken back to your elementary days where you would have like your social studies book and your teacher would randomly give you a passage. That is not what I'm speaking about. That is called popcorn reading, and that is not the best practice necessarily. What I'm speaking about is a teacher having a one-on-one individual relationship with a student where maybe the other students are in a small group and that teacher is doing what would be a direct reading assessment, specifically where a child would read a passage where they are looking at accuracy and fluency from that student. So that is an assessment practice, and that's what I was referring to when I was specifically speaking about decoding around that, not popcorn reading, like everybody read a little section, which brings up all kinds of issues, right, about embarrassment. That is not a safe practice in classrooms. So I'm not referring to that. Thank you so much for allowing me to clarify that.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you're cognizant of that, especially with so much criticism lately on SLPS's practices toward reading and the accusations that we're not taking literacy seriously. I think that we're taking a very cautious approach in making sure that we are assessing that properly. So I appreciate your due diligence there, Dr. Scarlett, and that is all of my questions.
I just had one really quick follow-up. Have we considered or looked into or discussed the possibility of a DESE innovation waiver, which they began last year?
Short answer, yes.
Cool.
I have one question. We continue to speak on the STAR testing. Is that the only testing that we're relying on when it comes to the benchmark question, when we're looking at the reading?
Sure, and so that is the current district assessment that we do have. And so if we decide that we go in a different direction prior to the end of 25-26, then of course we would come back to the board to say this is now the flagship assessment that we're using to track. But as I shared with Director Hubbard, we use our common formative assessments and common summative assessments. So those are district created assessments every quarter to track. And then we're also using our curricular resources from SAVIS to be able to address that as well. So those are two additional resources that we use to track progress.
So just to be clear, we're using the SAVIS, the STAR, and the other in-house, so to speak,
Correct.
resources as well. Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Sadie, I'm sorry.
Going back to the conversation of focusing on literacy and reading, if a parent of a student is requesting that a student get additional one-on-one support to be, taken out of the classroom, for example, and sit down and have someone and for them to be able to read out loud. What's the process for requesting those services, and are students receiving that extra support outside of the classroom?
Sure, and so I would think about just clarifying the question so you can correct me if I'm wrong. So are we looking at accommodations, modifications from a special education perspective, because that's a whole separate process, or just in-class interventions by the teacher?
I will say for now,
outside of that.
in-class interventions.
Sure.
Even, if a student doesn't have a 504 IEP, but the parent reaches out to the educator, the instructor, and says, hey, I really do think that my child needs some extra one-on-one support?
Sure. And we have a variety of ways that we're tracking that or that we work with teachers to track that information. And so it goes back to what I shared with President Cousins is looking at the actual curricular resource assessments. So one resource that we have is a tier 3. So those of our scholars that required like that intensive one-on-one in ELA and in mathematics. We're looking at that particular data. Teachers are pulling that and then deciding, here is something that I need to do specifically with that particular student. I'm looking at elementary right now to pull a small group, to pull an individual. And so I would say that that's a part of everyday practice that we want to continue to be across the board, but we have those resources in place. Parents can bring that to the attention of the teacher, and then the teacher has those resources built into our standards-based curriculum plans to say, here is what I need to do to target this small group, here is what I need to do to target individual scholars in this particular work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So as a follow-up to Board Member Sadie's question, if a parent, so my child is struggling with trying to read and they're needing additional help, and I'm going to my third grade, to her third grade teacher, I'm at parent-teacher conference, and I'm saying she's struggling with trying to get the sound words or whatever. She's been tested she's in third grade, she's on kindergarten reading level, and I want some additional one-on-one help. What resources is out there for her?
Resources, internal resources
Within the district. What would the teacher be able to offer for that child to get additional assistance?
Sure, and so outside of the teacher providing that directly, it goes back to our SAVIS resources. So the digital playlist that we've created around specific high priority standards that they could address on their devices. They have an opportunity for, I'm just thinking about that because I don't want to bring up my colleague, Dr. Moody, because like she would be able to answer all of those particular questions. And so, Dr. Moody, I'm not going to turn around. Are you still there, Dr. Moody?
Give me what you got,
I didn't look around because I told her at a certain time. There we go. She was like, don't call. Yes, and so I would say that our curricular-based resources, like our standards-based curriculum plans, like all of that is at their disposal to be able to reference that. You can still come over.
Is there like a person, does the teacher say, well, I'm going to send you to this resource group or
Well,
Dr.
that also depends on the person. That also depends at the school level as well, because there are certain reading intervention teachers that we have in our schools. So our reading intervention teachers, if you remember 2 years ago, funded by DESE, they're in our Title I elementary schools. They work on our individualized reading success plans. They create those plans based on the resources that are available in SAVIS Tier 2, Tier 3. So that's an immediate possible resource in addition to those curricular resources that we have.
Okay.
Anything else that you wanted to add there? There we go. Yeah, I would say that that's the first
reading
one that we
teachers.
focus on because they are directly connected to Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports.
So in our elementary schools, we have reading teachers?
I would say we have reading intervention teachers in the majority, and I could get you the actual number, but not in all of them.
But in some of our elementary schools, we do have reading teachers.
Yes.
Okay.
And is that because the positions are vacant or they haven't been allocated at those schools?
The positions are vacant.
Okay,
And
so
just
every
finding-
school has an allocation.
I wouldn't say that every school has an allocation, so I have to go back to that for Title I schools were prioritized, and maybe someone who looked over staffing can speak specifically to that. But Title I elementary schools, and I'm pausing because I'm thinking about the list that I just reviewed, there was an allocation for reading intervention teachers in those Title I elementary schools.
So I don't know if this will be your space to answer the question or if it will be Ms. Banks' space, but is that where that $2.5 million literacy funding will kind of come into place from the state?
And we've been using that since 2021, 2022. So that was
Okay.
the very first year.
But that is where that will kind of come into space. Okay. I just wanted to kind of help in regards to what Board Member Sadie was asking. Thank you very much. I know that was a lot for us to kind of hit you with. Is there any other questions for Dr. Smith? I can't see any mics on. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Modi, for walking up here getting your steps in. Anything else, Dr. Scarlett? That concludes yours.
Oh, no.
That concludes
Well,
hers. No,
It includes,
Janet
our-
is ours.
Janet is yours, but she's under mine. But she's mine too.
She's yours too. That concludes you, Dr. Scarlett?
That concludes
Okay.
us. Thank you. Thank
Now
you, Dr.
on
Smith.
to the great, great MSBA. Always glad to have you, Miss Janet Tilley. They say we don't have it, but we always do. Miss Janet Tilley will be here providing us the board continued training. I want to say it again, the board continued training from MSBA, Missouri State Board Association, the great Miss Janet Tilley.
Thanks. Wow.
The board continued training. I wanted
Yes,
the
yes.
board continued training. We do get training.
The board,
from
yes,
the-
and
from
you are
Missouri
part
State
of
Board
a
Association.
special kind of training that is called the continuum training that you're helping to develop for the rest of the state.
Yeah,
actually.
for the rest
All
of the
right, you're a part of all of that. So I am going to talk to you about, there are three things that I want to address tonight. And number one is that I hope that you are able to reflect and to see the amount of work, thought, effort, expertise that your staff has done in putting together these 4 key goals. I want to steal them and share them with other districts and say, when you're trying to put it all together, this is what it should look like. So it's obvious when I hear them that there was a whole lot of analysis, that there were, deep searches, that it was done from a needs analysis. It was done from all of the areas that indicate wonderful and effective practices. And so while it looks like, gee, we're only focusing on these 4 things, I think you have to step back and look at the impact of those 4 on absolutely everything else that is happening within the district. The other, so kudos to them, all right? And they didn't even pay me to say that, but kudos to them. The other is that I want you to know that as you move forward, you had to get these particular goals settled and set in order for you as the board to move forward in working with Dr. Scarlett on her goals, okay? Her goals, her evaluation goals are going to be centered around these 4. But if you recall, I think it was in an email that I sent to you, we talked about the difference between kind of quantitative measures and qualitative measures. They have given you quantitative goals. To get there, there's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of action that needs to happen underneath them. It's the adult actions in the classroom, and it's the adult actions at the cabinet level, at the administrative level, and at Dr. Scarlett's level, and also at yours, to be able to get there. And so as you are working with Dr. Scarlett in establishing her goals, you're going to want to be able to have evidence, and you're going to want to have measures. So please understand that a lot of the evidence that's probably going to come up from Dr. Scarlett is not maybe necessarily quantitative, but more of those qualitative measures. Making sure, A, that the curriculum's in place, B, that the curriculum is aligned, all right? That we have effective instruction going on in every classroom, that there are processes for monitoring that, all right? So I think I'm boring you, all right? I can see you kind of fading on me. So just know that, as you move forward, that it's going to look a little different for her. You have been inundated with the importance about looking at data. And you can be data rich, but information poor. In other words, you have a whole lot of stuff in front of you, but if you don't know how to read it, and if you don't know how to analyze it, and if your community doesn't know how to do that either, and to do it correctly, then it means absolutely nothing. And so this really is more some intense training I think that we can do together, but I wanted to kind of at least to give you an overview of 3 key ways or processes or steps in a process that you can use when you are given quantitative data. And one of the very first things that you have to do when you are given this data is to describe it. You have to know where this data came from. You need to know, kind of who put this data together. You need to understand and know what is its purpose, what's it supposed to be conveying. Because people can put PowerPoint slides up for you, they can print things in the newspaper, they can put it on Facebook, Instagram, wherever they want to put it. But if there's not the data narrative behind it, then it means nothing to you, okay? And so that's why I gave you this little handout. I sent it to you with those 3 steps. And I wanted to be able to show you how I did this process with another board. They don't use the STAR data. They use a very similar assessment called iReady. And iReady is kind of the same thing as what the STAR assessment does, and that is that its purpose is to be used by the teacher to inform his or her instruction. All right? It's what we call assessment for learning. And so these were some slides that were provided to the board, and I was concerned about the lack of questions that they asked about it, or the fact that they sort of looked at something and went, oh, that looks nice, and moved on. So I want to show you how I helped them to use those 3 little processes of describing the data, defining the data, describing the data, and questioning the data with this particular data set. So I'm sorry that these slides also are not bigger. All right, but I'll work on that, when I come back. But this was the data that they received at the end of the year, last year, from their iReady reading assessment about the proficiency level of their kids, okay? And so if you look at it, you start to see, oh, everything goes up, doesn't it? Okay? That looks great, and that looks wonderful. Until you start to do the next couple of steps, which is about describing it and questioning it. So I'm going to ask you to go to the second page with me, all right? Okay, I'm walking you through it or whatever. And I just want to show you kind of some of the things that we did and that we discussed, because I'm going to give you homework. I'm going to show you how it's done, but then I'm going to make you do it, okay? So the first thing that you do is you define it, and you look at that data, and it's like, okay, you ask the question, and you need to know the answer to this, and that is, what kind of data is this? What is it? All right, that's right here in front of me. And what is the source of this data? And I'm going to tell you, you need to be careful on that, because you have to make sure that your source is trustworthy. The other is, what is the overall purpose of this particular data? What is it supposed to tell me? And so we came up with, in working with this together, we came up with this particular remark about the fact that this data is a summary of the benchmark iReady reading assessment for grades K through 8, and is used to monitor growth in grade level proficiency across the school year. The summary also includes the percentage of students who scored within the grade level proficiency Lexile range in the fall, winter, and spring. I'm not talking about trends. I'm not talking about nothing else. All I'm doing is I'm just right there, just defining it. What is it? Okay? The next one is that very much like the analysis that your staff has done with that 10 years of data, and that is that they are working to describe it. And what they're looking for are patterns, trends, ranges like high to low that you begin to see or to notice. And so here are the things that this board noticed. Number one is that there is an increase in proficiency and mastery in all grade levels from fall to spring. The Lexile score also indicates an increase in proficiency and mastery from fall to spring in all grade levels except for kindergarten. Now, I'm not making any judgments here. All I'm doing is I'm just describing what's going on. The highest increase in proficiency from fall to spring occurs in kindergarten with an increase of 54%. That means from 28% to 82%. The lowest increases in proficiency from fall to spring occur in grades 6, 7, and 8, with only 6%, 5%, and 4%. And the grade level with the highest level of proficiency in the spring is in kindergarten with 82%, and the lowest level of proficiency in the spring is in 7th grade with 36%. I'm not coming to any conclusions. I'm just describing highs, lows, trends, changes, whatever. Then the next thing, and that is, it's also about what points seem to stand out to you. And so there were two things that stood out to them, and one of them is that the only grade levels that demonstrate a high level of proficiency are at K3, and that is 82%, 58%, and 57%. And then the other thing that they noticed is even though there was a trend line going up, okay, that proficiency rates at the end of the school year remain under 50% for all other grade levels. So the question then came, okay, are you okay with this as a board? Are you okay with this as a community? You know, and because all they were doing were looking at the pretty different colors of the bars and how it was going up. And so here were their questions that they came up with when we worked with it, is they wanted to know what is a Lexile and why is it reported with the iReady data. They had no clue what a Lexile was. And I'm not telling you what one is. You're going to have to look it up, okay? That's a joke because I'm just watching your little faces. All righty, all right. And so if a Lexile is also supposed to be an indicator of grade level proficiency, then why in kindergarten is there 100% for the fall and 94% in the spring when the iReady data shows a pretty significant increase in proficiency from fall to spring? How do these correlate with each other? And guess what? Your staff person needs to be able to explain that to you. I don't know if any of you read Reddit or not. I guess I shouldn't share that I read Reddit on the internet, but Reddit has a question or a group of explain it to me like I am 5. And I love that because it helps me to not feel so stupid, you know, and whatever. You are not expected to know and to understand all the nuances of literacy instruction. You know, when these questions were coming up, it was all I could do not to get out of my chair and go, oh, no, wait a minute. Okay, what you're talking about is a running record. What you're talking about is miscue analysis. What you're talking about, all of that process, that's what they are hired for, and they have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to do it, okay? And if they don't, then that's where Dr. Scarlett, you know, steps in. So in any case, sorry, I'm pontificating, man. I don't know where I get it, okay? Nobody's modeled that for me or anything, okay? And so here's another thing that they started to question. And they said there's an increase in proficiency according to the iReady data for each grade level from fall to spring. And it is expected that there would be a lower grade level proficiency rate in the fall. You don't expect them to be on grade level when they show up at your door in August. However, in grades 3 through 8, none of the grade levels demonstrate that at least 50% of the students have attained grade level proficiency. Does the MAP data also show this same trend? And this is where, again, Emily, I would use the item benchmark descriptors and I would pull out those items that correlate just to literacy standards, okay? Not the whole kit and caboodle. The slowest trend in increase in proficiency seems to occur in grades 6 and 7. Hello, middle school, okay? All right, all you have to do is like teach middle school or have a middle schooler and you know. And there was even research that was done by Dr. Jerry Valentine at Mizzou about that, you know, kids about 7th or 8th grade, that they don't have really much brain growth during that time. And as a parent, I could attest to that, you know, or whatever, that it slows down a little, that their physical body is requiring so much of their energy that there's not a whole lot of brain growth. I don't know, Donna. I'd have to go back and read it, but we'll just say he's, that was his theory, okay? And so the question that the board had is, does the district continue to provide focused reading instruction to all middle school students just as they do for K-5? In K-5, they were getting 120 minutes of literacy instruction every day. And what they found is that when they moved to 6th grade, it moved down to 50. So their question was, is the reason that they're not making that progress, is it because they still have these identified needs that we haven't looked at and we're not giving them the same amount of instruction? And then one of the other questions a board member asked, and I really liked it, is, what's an acceptable level of proficiency for each grade? Do we want everybody to be 75%? Is that realistic, not realistic? All right, great conversation. And then the other question that the board had, and they had one of the curriculum coordinators come up and explain how this was done, and that is, how do teachers use the iReady data to inform their reading instruction and in communicating with parents? Because iReady, just like STAR, gives these wonderful reports to teachers and to parents about what are the specific skills that this kid is doing well, what are the specific skills that this child needs to continue to work on. So anyway, those were the questions. All right, you're really with me, I can tell. So here's your homework.
I have a
Yes.
question. So one of the things I struggle with, and I think we kind of demonstrated this a little bit tonight, is, these numbers in a district our size, meaning the number of schools, so
When you've
spread
got
across
8
62 schools,
Right.
and there are different socioeconomic environments, English language learners. Some schools have a high level of SPED. Some schools are smaller, and because of that, maybe have other staffing challenges, like they don't have an assistant
Correct.
principal or things like that.
Right.
So, we look at these numbers, and they're all in an aggregate, and, we can sit there and say, oh, you got to get this number up. Well, maybe, one school has it at the top, but another school is struggling, and there may be other reasons why they're struggling other than, something that we're doing here in the district. So, I guess, how do we measure that? Is there a different or an added model for districts like ours to sort of ask those questions? So for example, when we talked about the reading specialists, it's there's $2.5 million for reading specialists in all these elementary schools. You got Title I funds, so you have the complicated funding mechanism, but then you also have staffing vacancies. And so what level, how much do we inquire to that level of granular detail? Okay, well, is the problem at this school staffing problems? Is that why their numbers are lower, or do we not concern ourselves school by school? We just look at the aggregate and leave that to the administration to figure out and come back at us.
It is your responsibility to ask those specific questions that you just did. And that is, okay, we're getting the 40,000-foot view, all right? Okay? What is the 10,000-foot view, which is the building level, all right? And how is that provided for our building leaders? And then how do they use that data to identify what are the areas of strength and the areas of need? Is that your responsibility? Maybe. It depends upon your goal, or whatever. You might want to be looking at that since you're focusing on 3rd grade for reading and for math. You might want to be more specific or granular for that. But overall, the answer is really no, all right? Because that belongs to Dr. Scarlett, all right? And it belongs to these individuals whom you have hired to do that. A kid is so much more than just a test score. And, and when every time Dr. Scarlett talks about multiple measures, I just want to hug her, because it is about all of those measures. It's about those running records where I'm pulling the kid up next to me and I'm sitting down one-on-one. We have 1 minute. He or she reads a passage. I do that miscue analysis. That's a part of it. The benchmark, the iReady or whatever that you have, or the STAR, that's another measure. The the assessments that you have, and I'm happy to hear that you have them, of, you know, those common formative assessments, that's another measure as well. And so to only say that the MAP score is indicative of what a child can or cannot do, to me, is a misstatement, because there's so many other pieces for that kid. And so while you will want to sometimes be that granular and weedy, it's hard for you not to because you care. That is their responsibility to take care of. And you have to let your superintendent create that team that she needs to be able to make sure that those kinds of conversations and data analysis are happening. And you ask her, how are your principals coming together, sharing their data, analyzing their data? How are grade level teams coming together and, you know, and doing their common, you know, assessments and sharing the data and informing their instruction? Those are kind of those professional learning communities types of structures. But you ask, how are they? Not, you know, you don't direct. It's hard, man. It's just hard, especially when you get individuals who sometimes do not have you cannot reason with someone who does not have the basic knowledge. And so, you know, understanding how to teach reading is extremely complicated, and understanding how to teach math well is extremely complicated. And it can't, you know, it's not that the general public can't really know exactly how to do that, but it is not, it's not one test score. I'm pontificating again, aren't I? Okay, all right. I should stop hanging out with you, I guess, one of those kinds of things. I have given to you in this handout some data that you have received in the last couple of months. And I'm going to have to apologize to Cheryl and to Angie because I've stolen their data and they don't know it, okay? It's all right? Okay, all right, all right. So you're going to see on the next page that I have, this came from Cheryl's update, and it's about your enrollment, okay? Very simple numbers, all right, of, you know, what your enrollment was for 22-23, what your enrollment was for 23-24. And then she disaggregated it down into grade levels. You see that to the right in a nice bar graph, okay? So my questions that I want you to think about, not tonight, please, not tonight, all right? Alrighty, is about define the data, describe the data, question the data. Just, you know, the important part here is that you really look at the description and the questioning. What questions do you have? Then the next page, also from Cheryl's data that she provided to you, which was the STAR data results from 2022-23 compared to 23-24, and this was from the fall, okay? And so I did put in, now she explained this in her presentation, but I don't know that you caught it. But there is a kind of a definition of what is meant by grade equivalent scores. So I put that in there just to kind of refresh your memory so that you know it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, gee, my child's, you know, a genius because, you know, he's 4 and he, you know, gets a 7.2. It means something different than that. Then, all right, the next page, again, Cheryl's data, but this was the cohort. Remember those groups of kids that she put together, okay? And we know that they're not clean cohorts because not everybody who was a 3rd grader is a 4th grader now, but she put those cohorts together for you. And again, just kind of go through that process with that data. And then I wanted to give you something different besides achievement data, and this is the data that Angie gave to you last spring on your Q3 revenues and expenditures. And she does a nice job of giving you kind of a table, and then she gives you a bar graph underneath. Okay? So here's your homework. You ready? I'm just looking at you, okay? Before I talk with you again, and that's the third thing that I'm going to work with you on here in just a minute. Before we meet again, I want you to play with this data, and I want you to play with it with just those three core questions of define it, describe it, and question it. And I'm going to challenge you that this is also something that you as a board member can do to help your constituents to be able to look at and at least have a cursory understanding of all this data that's thrown in front of them. They can remember three things if you teach it to them, and that is define it, describe it, and question it. Okay? All right? So, my question to you, my third thing, is about when will I see you again? I think there's a song about that. Okay. I know that we've had some different conversations about, what possibly in moving forward in the winter months and into early January, about whether or not you want to do the book study on the governance core. And, I have done that with Matt and Tony. I know Natalie and Donna, but we did that with Dr. Adams, if you recall. And it would be, this is the only book out there on school board stuff that I think is, first of all, I think it's one of the best, all right, that's out there. And so I am just suggesting, I think you all have talked about this. Am I correct on that? Okay, all right. I am just suggesting to you of let's initiate a virtual, although I would love to invite you over to my home, and you are invited if you want to drive there, all right? Or we're all showing up at Tony's house, one or the other. But to come to do a virtual book study like we did last time with the board and with Dr. Scarlett. I think I found, those conversations that we were able to have with Dr. Adams were very enlightening. I think it really helped. And I think it will help all of us. And then after we do that, then move into talking about doing some more targeted, kind of little workshop type things, maybe over some of those issues that might come up or ideas or, areas of where you want to delve a little bit deeper that we discuss in the book study piece. Okay? I'm still available to help you in navigating your evaluation process. But remember that kind of chart that you put together in August talked about that Dr. Scarlett would have her goals and kind of her professional growth plan to you in November. Okay? All right? And that we've also discussed the fact that a lot of the things that are going to be within that are going to be those kind of action steps, items of what she's going to be doing, all right, in order to be able to achieve your 4 big hunker goals, okay, your big hunker ones that you're going to hang with for at least 3 years, which is a smart thing to do. I'm going to tell you with the evaluation process, that, and I get this from Desi and from Dr. Katnick, and that is that it's not about the forms, it's about the process. So it's about having the conversation with her. It's about having multiple conversations throughout the year about her progress, all right? It's really not so much about the form, okay? Tony, you going to be okay? My love, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You are.
It's just been a long day.
Okay. You know how I feel about you?
Yes, I do.
All three of you. There's more than 3
Yeah.
of you. Okay. And poor Tracy over there I left out. And where's Natalie? Okay. And I think you know that SLPS has written its name on my heart. And it was an honor to be here tonight. So I'm really glad that I could just thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jenny. Yes, we did talk about the book study as well as the additional training. So we'll make sure we identify the dates
let me get through annual conference.
Right.
Okay, and I know that you have Council of Great City Schools and some things going on as well. And so let's get through that. We'll come together, you know, I'll just do kind of a little poll and we'll see. I think we did it in the evenings, usually,
Yeah.
you know, after supper and, you know, and whatever. So let me get that to you and then we'll start setting some actual dates, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Is there any questions for Ms. Janet?
It's Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Janet. So more of a comment than a question, but I really think that, sorry, my kid woke up from bedtime. I really think that it would be beneficial beyond the book study to really delve into some of those governance, like the sessions that we did preparing for regaining governance, because we are, at the time that we did those sessions, I mean, it was pretty much assumed that several board members would be returning,
Right.
and many didn't for various reasons. So Donna and I are the only two who have gone through those sessions, and we try as we might, we can't translate everything. It was just there was so much information. It was so jam packed, full of practical applications too. I mean, whether it was amending a motion on the floor or asking a budget question. And the appropriate way to direct those questions to staff. There were so many practice elements that I feel that we could benefit from, just and not just me, and not just new board members, but also me learning to deal with new board members, learning to work with them.
Right.
So I really, really hope that we can do some of those trainings again. And I know, you know, we've already paid for them as taxpayers, and we've already done them, but that is the nature of having an elected board, and that is what the taxpayers asked for, is to have an elected board, and that does change over. So ongoing professional development in that vein would be my strong preference and strong recommendation. So I think that's all I wanted to say, but I just really, really wanted to stress that for new board members, because there is a lot of buy-in that comes with that process when you go through that with your board,
Yes.
whether
Yes.
you
Yep.
like all of them or get along with all of them or not. You're able to hash out some of the details that go along with defining goals and priorities for the district, setting the tone and the mission and the vision. Those are things that can be worked out in those sessions. And we came to a lot of agreements with people we thought we might never agree with. And
That
I
is
think
true,
that
we
is
did.
going to be beneficial right now, for our board, just being a mixture of new, old, and in between. So
I don't know who you're
if that
calling
is
old.
something the board
but
is amenable to, I just wanted to bring that up in a
Yeah.
public session with all of us here, because I know I've had conversations with the other board members here and there, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I am absolutely for that and would encourage all of us to move in that direction, and I will facilitate anything I can.
Okay.
Uh,
And Natalie, I don't see
Yeah.
this as an either or. I see this as a both and. Okay?
Awesome. I
All
just want to
right.
make sure that we were all on the same page there, or
Yes.
gauge other board members' feelings on that.
Yep. No, I see this as a both and. That we do this intensive reading. I think some key areas are going to rise to the surface, and that I lost you, but she's there. All right, and then just know that we're going to do those in-depth kind of times together on the issues that will arise from what we talk about, and not that necessarily they're issues. They're just areas where you want to continue to grow. And the good thing is that you do not have an election next spring, correct? All right, so we're in it. All right. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you. I really want this team to have the same advantages we had in 2019
I know.
going into the 2018-19,
Oh.
because it was such a beneficial set of studies. So thank you, Janet, for always being with us, and it's good to see you, even if virtually tonight. But,
Okay. All right.
yeah.
Just know I hear you. All right.
Okay.
And I'm going to honor your heart. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Has everyone had the opportunity to review the November consent agenda? Any board reports?
I have a quick one on Monday. We had a legislative committee meeting. It was a great, very productive. We went over our legislative platform, suggested some changes which are being worked on. Also, our priorities we kept essentially intact, and we did something different this year. We divided up into subcommittees, so we're going to focus our subcommittees on actually 4 areas. So our legislative priorities around homelessness, trauma support, as well as sort of what we've termed as charter school issues, both in terms of changes to legislation that were suggested that may be necessary regarding school closures and notification of the district, as well as our last year priority of adding feasibility studies to the legislation before new schools are opening. And then we added a 4th one regarding special education. So we've divided the committee into subcommittees. The plan is they'll report back at our next meeting in November. We'll also hopefully then approve our priorities and our platform, which we'll present to the board in December to approve prior to the legislative session.
Any other board member reports? Board member Hikes?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to mention I went to a meeting at Vashon Alumni Association, and it was pretty much talking as Vice President Matt always do. He's always ahead of the game, which I really respect him for that, about charter schools and a new one that's trying to develop itself. And I just wanted to let you all know that the community is engaged. They know what the charter schools are doing, and us as a board, I think we should be more vocal on stopping all these charter schools from popping up. And I always have to give my props to all our community schools and our wraparound schools and all that they're doing for the community and the families of our school districts. So,
Lollipop.
thank you very
Maybe
much.
eat some pepperonis and we can look for a lollipop, okay?
Board member Hubbard, can you go on mute, please?
This
I
is
mean,
Natalie.
Board
Can I
member
just get this
Natalie,
over
can you go
quick?
on mute, please? I'm sorry,
Okay.
Board member Hikes. You were done? Okay, board member Val. Did you have a report, ma'am?
Yeah, sorry about that. So we are working on a governance committee meeting, and hold on just a minute. Okay, sorry. I was trying to go earlier. Sorry, never mind.
Any other board members report? Board member,
I unfortunately would like to make a motion to adjourn to return to closed session under Missouri Revised Statute 610021 subsection 1.
second.
Okay, sorry. Just one last, I guess we can call it discussion, but board report is the Land Utilization Authority meets tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. That is virtual via Zoom. You can find that on the St. Louis City website. We have a governance committee meeting in the works, but I also wanted the public to be aware that the Land Utilization Authority is meeting. The St. Louis Public Schools has 1 representative out of 3, which is me on that board. And this is to get vacant properties back on the tax rolls and funding our schools. So if you want to attend, please do.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. Ms.
Mr.
Henry.
Hikes?
Thank you.
I have one more thing, if possible.
Go ahead, Mr. Hikes.
Oh, it's just, I
Sorry,
have
Tracy.
information on the disparity of the pay with the charter schools. If we could possibly put it on the website so people can really see what's going on. Thank you very much, sorry.
Ms. Henry.
Mr. Hikes?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. Val?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
We are adjourned.